On the evening of February 1st, 2021, security camera footage from an apartment building in Canton, Massachusetts, captured Sandra Birchmore leaving and returning from clearing snow off of her car. A blizzard was moving into Canton that night. The snow was likely to keep everyone homebound for at least a day, maybe more. This video of Sandra is the last time that anyone, except her alleged killer, saw the 23-year-old alive. Hi there, I'm Kevin and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. Today's case is a disturbing one. Sandra Birchmore was found dead under questionable circumstances and by a police force that knew the young woman very well. The same department would later come under intense scrutiny following allegations of outright corruption. Despite these hurdles, evidence was uncovered in Sandra's case that questioned the official narrative. What was discovered shocked and appalled the entire country. Let's take a look. On the morning of Thursday, February 4th, 2021, Officer Cottard of the Canton Police Department responded to a request to perform a welfare check at the Canton Woods Apartments. Someone at Sharon Public Schools had contacted law enforcement, concerned for one of their employees, 23-year-old instructional assistant Sandra Birchmore. A blizzard had blanketed the state earlier in the week, causing cancellations of events as well as school closures, though by midweek, most locations had returned to their regular schedules. Sandra Birchmore, however, had not been reporting to work. When the officers entered the apartment, they found Sandra in the bedroom. She was on the floor, a strap around her neck. This strap was also attached to the closet door. She appeared to have been deceased for some time, likely several days. For some at the scene, Sandra's death was a personal loss. The young woman had been part of the Police Explorer program as a teen, a kind of junior police academy where youths interested in a career in law enforcement could learn and prepare to join the department. After 6 years in the junior academy, Sandra had become friendly with officers across Norfolk County. They now faced the harsh reality of her unexpected death. Officer Cottard and two colleagues reported observing nothing suspicious after an examination of the home. They did not spot any clues that would indicate a struggle had taken place. Despite what was described as quite a bit of clutter inside the home, all items appeared to be in their intended locations. Nothing had been knocked over or strewn about. There were no noted scuffs or indentations on the walls, nor any drag marks on the carpeting. These cursory observations, paired with the way in which they found Sandra in the bedroom, appeared to lead to one conclusion: that Sandra had made a tragic choice to end her own life. In the days following, family members of Sandra's helped to clean out her apartment. While they did so, they found numerous indications of a young woman who lost her life abruptly, while in the midst of doing and planning other things. There were wet clothes in the washing machine and another load in the dryer. Newly purchased items sat out unopened. Other packages ordered by Sandra shortly before her death continued to be delivered to her home in the days following. Most troubling, however, was what was in these packages. A brand new baby stroller, newborn onesies, various other clothing and baby items. Sandra had been 3 months pregnant. Friends found a poster which read, "Congratulations, you're going to be a father." That sign had an ultrasound photo on it and was sprinkled with glitter. If these indications of an excited, expectant mother were not enough to raise questions about how exactly Sandra had died, family members also found what they thought could be signs of a struggle. A necklace consisting of a thin gold chain with a pink flamingo charm was spotted on her bedroom floor. The necklace was a favorite of Sandra's. She was often photographed wearing it. When responders found her, the necklace was broken, hanging off of the left side of her neck. The charm rested on her abdomen. It had snapped open, but not at the clasp. And there was a large clump of hair on the chain. The family reported the necklace. They told law enforcement about how thrilled Sandra had been over her pregnancy. Regardless, the initial conclusion reached from a cursory examination of the scene that no foul play had occurred had been generally accepted by local law enforcement. They gave no indication of reassessing this conclusion. A recording was made when an officer had the unenviable task of calling Sandra's aunt to inform her of what they had discovered.
I regret, ma'am, that I have to tell you that Sandra is deceased.
Oh my God.
I'm very sorry for your loss.
It's still life. So happy to be pregnant.
The medical examiner's office is taking Sandra. They're taking her, and it's my understanding that they'll do an autopsy.
Back in the spring of 2010, at the age of 12, Sandra applied to join the Police Explorers program. She remained in the Explorers until 2016. The head of the program at the time, Robert Devine, said that Sandra was obsessed with police officers. Her interest in law enforcement may have stemmed, as friends later suggested, from a desire to find people in her life that she could trust. She lost her mother, with whom she had been extremely close at a young age. Shortly after, Sandra also lost her grandmother. Her father had never been in the picture. Sandra received treatment after experiencing emotional and physiological problems in the years following. She continued to see a therapist until her death. That she had a troubled childhood was known to the adults who remained in her life, including the officers running the Young Explorers Academy. Sandra lived with her aunt in Stoughton until late 2020, before moving into her own apartment in nearby Canton. Despite her newfound independence, friends and acquaintances said that Sandra often interacted socially as a teenager would, speaking in a childish way and oversharing information. New in her role as a classroom instructional assistant, coworkers reported that Sandra did not seem to care much for her work, but that she was very talkative with colleagues. The expectant mother did have other pursuits and passions, however. She was taking classes in preparation for applying to nursing school, and was taking all the necessary steps in anticipation of becoming a mother. On February 1st, the day that Sandra died, she was making plans for the baby. She had an OB/GYN appointment scheduled for February 10th, had contacted a photographer to take newborn photos, planned an official pregnancy announcement, and coordinated a gender reveal. That afternoon, she also searched for pregnancy-related information online and Googled brands of baby products. Her last known movements were also recorded. She entered her building early in the afternoon while chatting on her phone. At about 5 p.m., Sandra again went to the main lobby, this time to collect a DoorDash delivery. Roughly 45 minutes after that, she exited again to clean some snow off of her car. She must have been anticipating the blizzard that was moving in. When officers arrived at her home for the welfare check days later, they found snow piled on top of her vehicle. It was clear she had not traveled anywhere since the storm days before. Speaking with family members, friends, and coworkers, Massachusetts State Police, who were conducting the initial investigation, were routinely directed towards one individual. The man that Sandra had alleged was the father of her unborn child. That man was Stoughton Police Department Detective Matthew Farwell. The 38-year-old had married wife Michelle in 2013. He was the father of 3 children. Detective Farwell had also been an instructor with the Police Explorers program since joining the department in Stoughton in 2012. He met Sandra at that time. She would have been 14 years old. Matthew told his colleagues looking into Sandra's case that he reconnected with the then 23-year-old several months before. After a night out with too much to drink, he admitted that they had been intimate. He further confessed to meeting with her once or twice more after that. But the detective rejected the assertion that he had impregnated Sandra. The timing simply did not add up, he claimed. More recently, he had been distancing himself from her, and then he claimed he had formally and assertively broken things off with her. The breakup occurred on the evening of February 1st at Sandra's home. It had been a nasty argument, he said. She had been very upset, but alive, when he left her apartment. The detective's story may have fooled his fellow law enforcement officers, who likely wanted it to be true, but his claims did not convince anyone who knew Sandra. She was not known to keep secrets. She spoke openly about her personal life, apparently even to those whom she had only known for a short time. In fact, Sandra's oversharing was behavior that made her coworkers uncomfortable. Those even closer to her, such as extended family, have been made aware of details that often upset them.
She spent a lot of time over here. Many summers. Used to have the pool in the backyard. She was hilarious, and she was smart as a whip too. Oh my God, she was smart as a whip. Years goes by, she slips out that she may or may not be having a relationship with one of the instructors. Family members are a little upset about it.
We just all knew he was the father. She's talked about him for years.
According to her cousin, to whom she confided, Sandra's latest pregnancy was not her first.
She had told me she had a miscarriage, and the father was a police officer. Sad that she had the miscarriage, you know. So when she finally got pregnant and everything was going well, right before she passed away, she was just so ecstatic that she was finally going to be a mother.
Upon her death, the family released a statement about Sandra. They said her greatest wish was to become a mother, and she would have been an amazing one. In May 2021, the pathologist who conducted the autopsy at the state medical examiner's office ruled that Sandra Birchmore's manner of death was suicide.
Sandra was a quirky, kind child. She grew up in Stoughton, Massachusetts, and she was excited that she was pregnant and about to have a baby. She would tell anybody that she was so excited to have this child. And that is part of the reason why people didn't believe that she did this to herself.
Detective Matthew Farwell's admission of a relationship with Sandra prompted an internal investigation at the Stoughton Police Department. It sought to uncover the full truth of what may have occurred during her time with the Young Explorers program. The shocking and deeply upsetting details of this internal affairs investigation were released to the public the following September.
What I'm about to brief you on is something deeply troubling to me as a human being and as a police chief. Ms. Birchmore was a vulnerable person who had one constant in her life since childhood: her unwavering admiration of police officers, of those serving the military, people in uniform, people with oaths and duties to protect and serve. The admiration led her to form relationships with men who were willing to take advantage of her. What I am here to talk about today is her life and how she was failed by, manipulated by, and used by people of authority that she admired and trusted right up until her final days.
3 members of the Stoughton Police, Detective Matthew Farwell, his twin brother, Officer William Farwell, and the former deputy chief and head of the Police Explorers program, Robert Devine, were all found to have played a role in grooming and abusing Sandra. Internal Affairs uncovered evidence suggesting that Matthew's personal relationship with Sandra began when she was just 15 years old. At that time, he was 27. The age of consent in Massachusetts is 16. The investigation found that both William and Robert's physical relationship with her was ongoing at the time of her death. They found that William had attempted to introduce Sandra to other men, and that at least one additional officer from another department was complicit. That man was later named as Abington Police Officer Josh Heel. This was not the first time that former Deputy Devine had been involved in a department scandal. In 2014, graphic photos of Robert and a mistress were emailed to members of the department and their spouses. As a result, he was demoted to the role of patrol officer, but to the surprise of many, remained on the force. In the wake of this investigation, all three men from Stoughton, the Farwell brothers and Devine, resigned from the department. Steps were then taken to ensure that they were decertified and unable to work in law enforcement again. The evidence was significant enough to summon the disgust and condemnation of the current police chief and the public, but the county fell short of bringing criminal charges. Despite multiple witnesses who could speak to the disturbing details shared with them from Sandra, the DA claimed that the case was too weak to pursue. The investigation also found that at least one individual had attempted to report Matthew Farwell's behavior directly to the Stoughton PD in January of that year. A friend of Sandra's, whom she owed money, had called the department to try to report the dispute they were having. During that call, the friend told the officer on the phone that Matthew Farwell should look into getting her money back, since he was in a sexual relationship with Sandra. The officer, instead of reporting what the friend said in the call, chose only to mention it directly to Matthew Farwell. The detective told the officer to keep the information quiet and not mention it to anyone else, which is exactly what happened. Yet another friend approached police immediately following Sandra's death with information implicating Detective Farwell in suspected foul play.
These men knew who they were dealing with, an innocent girl who was just looking for love and attention. And she didn't have an appropriate male figure in her life because her father wasn't in her life. So these guys became that, but they groomed her and they used that to their advantage.
The results of the internal investigation came as a shock to the public in Canton, as well as neighboring Stoughton. The communities are separated by only a few miles. As the horrific details came to the surface, so too did public grievance over the broader issue of police corruption, which appeared to permeate all of Norfolk County. It seemed unreasonable to believe that Sandra had been involved with so many officers for years without the arrangement becoming an open secret, shared and discussed amongst officers across departments, perhaps across the wider county.
In the city are supposed to protect and serve, and it's kind of a shame that, you send your kid into a field where you think that she will be protected and she is serving for a higher purpose, and it's everything but that.
The question is, what the hell is going on? Who is in charge there? And if anybody's in charge there, is he or she being held accountable?
The police, unfortunately, now that it's showing how corrupt some of our, legal systems are, I think the police need to be held responsible.
There's a bad element that has been allowed to happen, and there's been cover-ups, and it's, it shakes the trust of people.
There was reason to believe that the issues with law enforcement ran deeper than Sandra's case. Almost exactly 1 year after her tragic death, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found dead in the snow following an argument with his girlfriend, Karen Reed. Karen was arrested and later tried for the murder while protests took place outside the courtroom daily, claiming Canton police framed Karen for the murder and were covering for the real killer.
This case, it has sparked a lot of attention from Boston and beyond. It's prompted major media coverage, and to be honest and to be frank, it sparked several conspiracy theories. NBC 10's Manoj Kwangwar.
Not surprisingly, there were overlaps in the personnel working on both Sandra and John O'Keefe's cases.
Everything's connected. It's part of the same Norfolk County DA's office. They're all connected, but now they're coming to light.
This included 2 Canton and 3 state police, a detective from each force. Each of them came to the same conclusion relating to Sandra's death, that it was not a homicide. The conclusion was reached despite family members' insistence that Sandra was ecstatically happy about becoming a mother. Friends also came forward reporting that Sandra had informed them that the father, who they knew to be Detective Farwell, had been angry over the pregnancy. Sandra had told Matthew that she expected $4,000 a month in child support and an additional $3,000 for daycare. She told her friends that they argued over whether he would sign the birth certificate. At one point, she said that he told her that he was not the father and that he just wished she would die. This information was recorded by state police, but not pursued. While evidence of foul play was set aside, reports were also made that Matthew Farwell complained openly to a colleague that he had been looked into by the Massachusetts State Police at all. Over drinks with an unnamed individual, he expressed frustration that the matter had not been immediately dismissed by by fellow law enforcement. In March 2021, Matthew had been asked to hand over his personal and work cell phones to State Trooper Nick Guarino to extract their data. This trooper also worked on the Karen Reed case, where defense attorneys argued he failed to retrieve key data.
That extraction you placed on the server did not include all the potential data on John O'Keefe's phone, did it?
How do you mean?
Well, didn't you indicate in your report that the extraction was not inclusive of all potential data contained within the device?
No, that's not true.
That August, after months with the devices, Guarino reported that he was unable to locate any messages between Matthew and Sandra on either device. Shortly thereafter, a federal expert assisting the internal affairs investigation would extract over 32,000 text exchanges made between the two in the year before Sandra's death. The county would not pursue charges, but the family of Sandra Birchmore continued to seek justice nonetheless. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the town of Stoughton in late 2022. The civil lawsuit alleged wrongful death, negligence, pain and suffering, and emotional distress over what it described as a years-long grooming scheme undertaken by 3 members of law enforcement, which ultimately resulted in Sandra's death. They did not need to allege it was homicide to prove that these men were the reason that Sandra was no longer living. But that did not mean that they accepted the conclusion reached by the state medical examiner. The family reached out to prominent and well-respected forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Bodden, for a second opinion. He examined the work and conclusions of Sandra's original autopsy. Dr. Bodden's professional conclusions contradicted the original results. He found that Sandra had not died by hanging, but rather by strangulation. The manner of death was homicide. It was the FBI, not the local or state police, that took over the investigation. The FBI asked 2 additional medical examiners to draw independent conclusions based on the same photos and documentation from the original autopsy. Both doctors agreed with the determination made by Dr. Bodden. Sandra had been attacked. There had been a struggle, and she had been killed. Had the local detectives extracted and scrutinized Sandra's correspondence with Matthew Farwell, they would have discovered that the dynamic of the relationship shifted on December 28, 2020, when Sandra told Matthew that she was pregnant. Messages to the detective and others show that Sandra had intended to get pregnant. Their physical relationship appeared to have continued more or less uninterrupted for roughly 8 years. Messages detailed a disturbing trend of reliving encounters from the earlier years, and the detective in his late 30s controlling the young and vulnerable woman who idolized him as an officer. Then, in October 2020, Sandra wrote a draft text intended for Matthew's wife and sent it to a friend. It read, "I am just messaging to inform you that your husband Matthew has been out cheating on you since before you guys were even married." The friend who received this message informed Sandra that Matthew's wife was in fact expecting their 3rd child. She was due in February. On that same day, Sandra began asking Matthew to visit at set times during her cycle. She too wanted a baby. The detective, in conversations that took place in person, evidently agreed. Though after the pregnancy news came 2 months later, Matthew did not respond well. "I'm mad you're acting how you are over a choice we both made. I'm mad you act like you gave anyone a choice. LMAO, oh, so you didn't have a choice? Per usual, you make and do whatever you want. You're mad she's due in February and I'm in September, and you don't know how you're going to be there for both of us. You are truly the worst person on the face of the earth." The detective's anger was also piqued following the phone call made by Sandra's friend to the department when they openly spoke about their relationship to his colleague. He wrote, "Like you have no idea how bad what she did is. I literally can't believe this is even real life. Like, what else do I have to worry about now? Which other friend will do something tomorrow?" At least 3 friends of Sandra's, whom she was in contact with in the weeks before her death, told agents that Matthew had grown physically violent with her when they discussed the pregnancy. Sandra Birchmore was 4 feet 10 inches tall. Matthew Farwell is 6'4". 10 days before she died, he had gotten angry with her for showing him a fetal sonogram. According to what she told friends, his response was, "That's not my child. I don't want anything really to do with you." And then he pushed her to the ground. Though what was more telling than this escalating behavior was what happened 1 week before the murder, when his anger disappeared. At this time, Matthew began responding to messages about the pregnancy positively. He agreed that they could talk about using his name on the birth certificate. He also reminded Sandra of an offer she had made to give him a key to her apartment. In October, he had said it was a bad idea for him to keep a key, but in the last week of January, records show that he had one made. Matthew then requested the passcode to enter the Canton Woods building, asking Sandra if it was the same code used by all residents, or was it specifically assigned to her. On January 24th, only days before she was killed, Sandra texted a friend about his visit that night. He asked me if I'd give him a key and said that if I keep it a secret, meaning the baby, he'll be around and see them and all that. So it's somewhere. Then he looked in my closet and then the bathroom, but I don't know why. Haven't figured that out. To another friend, she wrote, "But last night he opened my closet door for something and then he went into my bathroom looking at my bathroom. It was just really odd. He started looking around. I don't know." On the night Sandra died, she was captured on video at approximately 5:01 p.m. accepting a DoorDash order, and then again going outside briefly and returning with a snow brush. The timestamps on the apartment security camera footage was found to be 13 minutes off of real time. The last time that Sandra is seen alive on the video is at 5:33 p.m. Later that evening, at just after 9 p.m., Matthew sent her a text message asking whether he could come by for a second. Surveillance video shows Matthew entering the Canton apartment building at 9:14 p.m. In the surveillance video, he is wearing street clothes, a hoodie with the hood up, and a face mask. Multiple witnesses told FBI investigators that the detective resisted wearing a mask during the pandemic. He would only wear one when on duty and required by department policy to do so. The video surveillance recording shows that Matthew left the apartment at 9:43. He told police that this is when he broke off his supposedly brief affair with Sandra. He claimed that she was alive when he left. Health data on Sandra's iPhone showed that her last movement was recorded that night at 9:40 p.m., 3 minutes before Matthew was captured on surveillance leaving her apartment. She had moved 8 steps according to her device. The iPhone was found 12 feet from her right hand. The phone powered off from battery loss 2 days later, on February 3rd. On August 28, 2024, Matthew Farwell was arrested by federal authorities and indicted for 1 count of killing a witness or victim, a charge more commonly applied to organized crime. Charging Matthew with a federal crime allowed the U.S. District Attorneys and the FBI to retain jurisdiction over the case, one that had been bungled under a cloud of alleged corruption by local and state officials. They argued that Matthew was motivated by the desire to silence Sandra. Authorities alleged that Matthew Farwell chose to murder Sandra at an opportune time, when his wife, having gone into labor, was otherwise occupied. The incoming storm also gave him cover. He knew it was more likely to delay anyone discovering Sandra in the apartment for a day or more. After scoping the apartment the week before, the detective, professionally trained and adept in crime scene analysis, staged the murder in an attempt to deceive his colleagues. Then he relied upon law enforcement loyalties to cast a blind eye on the mountain of evidence pointing towards him. As of the publication of this video, he remains in custody. If convicted, Matthew Farwell may face the death penalty. An investigation from early 2024 by the Marshall Project detailed the history of sexual abuse and misconduct allegations within law enforcement explorer programs. Officers did not always face criminal prosecutions for their actions, and among those that did, about half were sentenced to time behind bars, ranging from weekends in jail to years in prison. Documents provided by the Stoughton Police Department show a program run with little oversight. They have stated that the program is no longer in operation. Karen Reed's first trial ended in a hung jury. Her defense alleged an intricate conspiracy among law enforcement officers to frame her in the killing. These many charges of corruption resulted in a public vote for a full audit to be undertaken of the Canton Police Department. Protesters calling for the vote carried signs that read, "Free Karen Reed" and "Justice for Sandra Birchmore." That was the tragic case of Sandra Birchmore. Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to Nick Bennett, Karen Ann, Jasminique, and Janek for joining the Members Lounge. I'm Kevin, this is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
Found out the lounge just what you thought.